Welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Carker Gold, and this is a special episode that I'm making just after chapter 90 of the Bleach Revisited series. So if you've watched up to there, then this won't have any spoilers for anything after chapter 90. But I wanted to take a little bit, because I did mention in one of my videos, and I wanted to do a little bit more research, and I thought this was interesting and something worth bringing up, because again, it's something that I don't really hear a lot of discussion on, and I want to save these bonus videos for things that I, as a fan of Bleach that's been following it since the beginning, I typically don't hear people talking about, or have never heard people talking about, despite being in Bleach fandom since I was, like a kid. So, one of the big things is, so I mentioned that a lot of these swords, a lot of the Zanpakuto is going to have the Maru suffix, M-A-R-U, as a part of their name. And I had mentioned on the previous episode, whenever I talked about this, that this is something you have happen in anime a lot, where a character will have some sort of characteristic, and then they will have, the affix, Maru added onto it. Like I had mentioned Inu Maru being like dog guy, essentially, and then like that essentially Maru tends to kind of just be like a name suffix that sort of helps to like make a name out of another thing. But I've done some more research, and that does hold to be true, I will say. And it's certainly a naming convention for a lot of anime. So you see this, if you go to Naruto is rife with it, right? There's the character Orochimaru, which Orochi is just, like a mythical snake yokai, but Orochimaru is like evoking that, but like as a guy, right? Um, yeah. There's Shikamaru, which he's a part of the Shikacho, which is like a whole thing where Shika is the deer of the butterfly deer and boar triad in Hanafuda. So Shikamaru fits within that. Although he's not incredibly deer-like otherwise, so on and so forth. Nevertheless, it gets used in names a lot, but I looked it up, and so the reason why at least this one guy that I found online was saying, the reason why it got used a lot for names is that it actually, it used to have a lot more of a connotation, because it's got a lot of different meanings. But one of the meanings apparently was, and this might be like just some folkloric kind of thing that I'm about to tell you, which I think is interesting because Bleach is so folkloric and borrows from these mythologies. So that's why I thought there was a cool mythology to this. But the children would be named with the Maru suffix because it actually conjured, had the meaning of like excrement or poop or, like something like that, right? But the idea was that you would give your child this name that carried this connotation because you didn't want them to be stolen away, or taken by the Oni or whatever, right? So you could sort of protect them by giving them a name, like, oh well, I don't want to take that child, he's got a terrible name, or like, what's in this house, and it's like, oh, nothing but poop. You just keep going, right? So that was one story that I had read, and I don't know how true that holds, though. The I think it's called an Omaru or an Umaru or something like that, is actually a child's toilet. So I think that might be remnant of that, though it could be also folkloric from that as well. I don't know, but Maru typically, like I've looked up meanings. There's like one that's just like circle. There's a lot of meanings for this word, different ways it can be written, which Japanese, right? But typically got used as a name suffix for typically like noble names and things like that. So you'll see that in a lot of like kind of more prestigious sort of characters. Is that it'll be tacked on there to kind of bring them. I think a lot of anime names tend to tack it on because it is evocative of samurai times in which it was much more of a common suffix to add to people's names. So that's for people naming. However, for weapons, a lot of swords got named too with the Maru suffix, and notably, a lot of boats would get named that way too. And it's supposed to be like a thing that connects the name to like a person, like denotes like it having been named by the person, like a sense of ownership and connection to whatever the name is. Otherwise, um, so it is sort of like what I was talking about before, in which it kind of helps to personify the thing that you are naming, but also carries a connotation of like ownership or connection. So a lot of ships get named this way because of these harbors that work with them. But historically, was used for the names of a lot of different swords and different weapons throughout Japanese history. And so, of course, we have Bleach where these characters own these swords. But the other kind of great thing is not only do they have these Zanpakuto, these swords that are born of their spirit of them having this spiritual entity, right? Um, right. But and like they have to give them a name or find their name, just like Ichigo discovered Zangetsu. Assumably the same is the case for, of course, Renji here, who we have depicted. This is the Bleach Brave Souls art of the character for one of the units in Bleach Brave Souls, one of the versions of him. And so I decided to use art from that for the characters I'm going to depict here. But I have Renji, and then, of course, what started this whole discussion was Ikaku, which is the other image I have. But here's Renji with Zabimaru, of course. And then we have a Ikaku with Hozukimaru. And so I wanted to kind of bring them both up because they both have Maru in their Shikai names, but also because, you can expect that there will be, of course, more Zanpakuto. There will certainly be more Zanpakuto with the suffix Maru attached. And so what I thought was kind of interesting about that, why I thought it was a neat kind of detail, wasn't just because of the one story or the other, but the sort of amalgamation of these stories. One, because Bleach so much is an amalgamation of different fantasy tropes and different sort of afterlife mythologies and folkloric elements. So it's kind of neat that then the naming conventions, even for these weapons, can kind of take all that together. But the idea that there's this name that you give to not just this thing that you have, but also to a person, and then that's tied into having this whole connection to these, like the Oni, and not wanting that person being kind of protected against the Oni, or against like foul spirits, right? So it's interesting that it does two things. It not only shows that this is a very personalized weapon that is for that person that they have a strong connection to, but it also and then helps to kind of reflect whatever other things. I don't know Japanese, so I couldn't tell you what the Hozuki or the Zabi in either of them are. That's something that you'll have to maybe figure out for yourself. Depending on how it's written, it can vary, which does end up, I will say, being significant. The different ways that you can read the names for these. We do have the translations that were given to us by Viz, but given that there are different ways to read these names, and given that it's much more contextual, I understand, rather than literal. Literal translation often doesn't do you very good. Like whenever it's like, because I remember Hozukimaru is like cherry blossom something something some nonsense. It doesn't really seem like it fits. But that's because you don't understand like the connotations or the entire like use of the word. Just kind of like if you didn't know English and I told you like something was called a refrigerator, like that wouldn't make any, like it doesn't, it would be a nonsense word. But like once you start to understand, like, okay, this is what it means to refrigerate a thing, and this is, and this is what it means to refrigerate it or whatever. Yeah, I don't know, something along those lines. I'm not a linguist either. I do love language, but it's more from a writing kind of point of view and a communication point of view than it is necessarily one of etymology. That said, all in all, I think that the Maru suffix being used here for these different swords is mostly meant to evoke that sort of sword naming convention. But it does also evoke this sort of folkloric child naming convention as well. And so that's kind of interesting, especially considering that some of these characters are supposed to be hundreds of years old, right? And so if you think, okay, well, maybe the fact that these characters might have like an antiquated name or even have antiquated ways of naming their weapons maybe fits for this anachronistic? No. Oh boy. Out of time. It's not anachronistic. That's like anarchy, right? It's achronistic. Like not within the right actual time period. Um, boy, pronunciation. Anyway, I don't edit these. I don't make a script for them. This is just off the cuff. But I did want to share a little bit about these characters in that Maru suffix because it did come up in an episode, and it's something that I was looking to do more research on. And I think whenever I stumbled upon, not just it being a weapon name, but also it being a child name thing and having the sort of backgrounds it did, especially whenever I was reading up about it potentially having this sort of not just historical significance, but also a mythological one. I was like, ooh, that fits for Bleach way better than I thought, you know? So I figured I'd make a video about it. And as always, these bonus videos they're going to be things that will be made to look at and discuss different elements of the series. So yeah, here's the one on the Marus. I obviously I could do a more complete one with all of them. I just wanted to get one that addressed something that came out in the most recent episode that I had been working on, and I figure, well, instead of having spoilers in it for everything, I'd make it more apt towards uh, the ones that we have so far and what we had been reading. So if anybody that's following along that you know isn't completely caught up with the manga, that doesn't know all the different Zanpakuto, then it would not be a spoiler for them. But yeah, that's all I have to say on this one. It's hopefully you learned something. If you can teach me a little bit more about Marus, or if you want to talk about those suffixes or the naming conventions or anything like that. Um, I know both of these weapons do have pretty involved naming conventions. A lot of the Zanpakuto do have a lot going on with their names. Names are pretty significant in Bleach for a number of reasons. And so, obviously this can dip into spoiler territory very fast. So, that said, any spoilers that you want to leave on this comment, make sure that you are on this video, make sure that you leave a comment that properly demarks them. But otherwise, like I said, hopefully this has been insightful for you. Doing the research has certainly been pretty insightful for me and has only thickened my enjoyment for the series. So, good stuff. Good stuff. Anyway, this is all for now. This has been Karker Gold, reminding you that spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.